Have you ever walked into a room expecting love, expecting warm smiles and soft hugs, and instead you feel the air freeze around you like you were never part of the story at all? That's exactly how it felt when I stepped into the house that morning, thinking we were gathering as a family to read my late husband's will. But instead, I felt something cold brush against my heart the moment my daughter-in-law looked at me with that strange little smirk, the kind that makes your stomach whisper, "Careful, something is wrong." I tried to shake it off, really I did, because I wanted to believe the best. I always tried to believe the best, but the tension in the room was so thick I could almost hear it breathing. People who used to greet me warmly barely lifted their heads. Even my son, my own boy, avoided my eyes like I was carrying something dangerous. A small sigh slipped from me, that old tired kind of sigh that feels like a crack deep inside, and I asked myself, what changed? When did I become a stranger in my own family? My daughter-in-law, Melissa, walked toward me with a kind of confidence that wasn't confidence at all. It was greed wearing perfume. She stopped so close I could smell her expensive floral scent, and right before anyone else arrived, she leaned in with a smile that felt like a blade and whispered, "Just so you know, you're not in the will anymore. All 77 million comes to us. You may as well stop pretending you matter here." Ha ha ha. Yes, I actually let out a tiny, shocked laugh. Not because anything was funny, but because sometimes disbelief pushes a soft laugh out of you before the pain arrives. I blinked hard, my heart thumping, wondering if she was joking, but her eyes were deadly serious. Completely. Try not to embarrass yourself when the lawyer reads it. My breath caught in my chest. Out? Me? The wife who stood by my husband through sickness, through financial storms, through losses, through everything life threw at us. The woman who helped him build everything, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. Oh, my heart actually hurt. It felt like a small part of me started weeping inside, even though no tears came out yet. And right then, something strange happened. My hands started shaking, not out of fear, but out of confusion and the shock that comes from having the floor suddenly ripped out from under your feet. I looked around the room, searching for my son's eyes, hoping for a sign of truth or reassurance, but he wouldn't look at me. He just stared at the papers in his hands, pretending to read something that wasn't even real, pretending not to hear his wife stabbing me word by word. When did I lose him? When did she take him away from me? Why didn't he defend me? 1,000 questions flickered through me like sparks in a dry forest, each one burning hotter than the last. I tried to steady myself, whispering inside my mind, maybe she's bluffing. But then she laughed, an airy, careless laugh that made my skin crawl, and said, "Don't worry, we'll take good care of the estate. You can. Retire somewhere quiet." I felt something inside me twist sharply, and for the first time in years, I felt the sting of fear, real fear. Not the kind that makes you scream, but the kind that makes you feel suddenly invisible, like your existence could be erased with one signature. I swallowed hard, feeling my throat dry, and forced myself to stand tall, even though my knees were trembling so badly, I thought I might fall. She walked away like she had already won, and my son followed her like he didn't even see me, and I just stood there, holding my own hands to stop them from shaking. For a moment, it felt like the walls were leaning in on me, whispering, "You're losing everything." I closed my eyes and whispered a small prayer, asking for strength, asking for clarity, asking for truth. Because something felt off. So off that even my grief paused long enough to notice. If I were truly out of the will, why did my husband never tell me? Why did he never change how he treated me? Why did he keep saying, even in his last days, "Don't worry, I've taken care of you"? A soft weeping sound escaped me. Not full crying, just that quiet, broken sound your heart makes when it's trying not to collapse. Then I wiped my face quickly, because no one here needed the satisfaction of seeing me hurt. As the room filled with relatives and lawyers, I kept replaying her words in my head like a cruel echo. You're out. You're out. You're out. You're out. But something deeper whispered back. Are you sure? Are you sure she's telling the truth? Are you sure she knows anything at all? And that whisper kept me standing. My daughter-in-law strutted around like she already owned everything, like she'd built the empire she clearly thought she would inherit. But something in her eyes looked too hungry, too desperate, too certain. People who are secure don't act that smug. My husband was a smart man, a cautious man. He trusted deeply, but not blindly. And suddenly, a warm memory floated into my mind, him chuckling softly beside me one night, saying, "Some people forget wills have more than one page." Oh my God, even in my heartbreak, that memory made the corner of my mouth lift. Could it be? Could he have predicted this? As I took my seat, trying to breathe normally, trying to keep my heart from banging out of my chest, I felt something shift inside me. A small spark, a tiny flame of hope or curiosity or maybe stubbornness, I couldn't tell. And when the lawyer finally walked in holding that thick folder, my daughter-in-law smirked at me one more time, as if she had already buried me alive. Because something quiet, something deep told me she was celebrating too soon. And as I watched her smile like she'd already won, I felt a strange calm rise in me. Because I suddenly realized the real surprise hadn't even begun. That's exactly what happened when everyone finally gathered for the will reading, and my daughter-in-law decided to announce my destruction before the lawyer even opened his folder. The room hadn't fully settled yet. Chairs scraped softly. People murmured, some offering me tiny, sympathetic smiles, others pretending not to notice. I looked like someone who had just walked through a storm. My heart was still shaking from what she whispered earlier, and I tried to distract myself by smoothing my dress, sighing quietly, forcing calm into my fingers that wouldn't stop trembling. Then out of nowhere, boom! Melissa clapped her hands lightly and said loud enough for half the room to hear, "Well, since the money is coming to us, I hope this whole reading doesn't take too long." She meant it. She wanted everyone to hear it. My breath caught again. I felt my cheeks warming, not with embarrassment, but with disbelief. I whispered, "What are you talking about?" But she just waved her hand like I was some background character interrupting her scene. "Oh, please," she said, flipping her perfect hair. "You don't still think you're in the will, right? Everything goes to us." That's what he told my husband. My husband? My late husband? I looked desperately at my son, hoping he would correct her, calm her, defend me, say something. But he kept staring at the floor like the pattern on the carpet was suddenly the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen. My heart whispered, "Please, Ethan, say something." But his silence stabbed deeper than her words. The entire room shifted. People exchanged looks, curious, confused, even a little excited in that horrible human way where drama becomes entertainment. I felt like I was shrinking, like I was slowly disappearing from the room. My voice came out small, fragile. "Your father would never cut me out." Melissa's laugh came out sharp, almost mocking. "Oh, sweetie, you really don't know him as well as you think. Sweetie." She called me sweetie. That fake sweetness people use right before they twist the knife. My hands started shaking so badly, I had to grip the edge of the chair to steady myself. No, something isn't right, I kept telling myself. He would never do that. Never. Memories rushed through me. My husband holding my hand when I cried after a long day. Him whispering, "Don't worry, I'll always take care of you." Him tucking important envelopes away in his desk with a little smile like he was planning something protective. Why would a man who loved me through every storm suddenly throw me away? My mind kept spinning, dizzy with questions. Melissa leaned back in her chair, smiling like she was posing for a portrait titled, "Victory Before Battle." She wasn't just confident. She was overly confident, the kind of confidence that screams insecurity hiding behind glitter. Once the assets transfer, Ethan and I will decide what to do with the property. Maybe renovate, maybe sell. Depends on what brings the best return. And she was already acting like the queen of my husband's empire. The empire we built together. I laughed. Yes, an actual soft, shaky ha-ha escaped me. Not because anything was funny, but because the absurdity was so heavy I felt my mind trying to float above it. "You don't decide anything," I managed to say. "Not until the will is read." For a tiny second, I saw her eyes twitch. Fear, irritation, panic, something. But she quickly plastered her confident smirk back on. "Oh, trust me," she said. "I already know the result. My husband told me everything. He said his dad didn't want you controlling the money." I actually gasped. An involuntary, broken gasp. "Ethan?" I whispered. "He told you that?" My son still wouldn't look at me. Instead, he whispered something to her, and she nodded proudly like she owned him, like she had shaped him into something unrecognizable. A quiet weeping sound bubbled in my chest. Not tears, not yet, but that raw ache that sits right under your ribs, begging to spill out. What did she do to him? Why is he letting her say these things? The room grew heavy. Even the air felt thicker. A few relatives shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to defend me or stay silent. No one wanted to be on the wrong side of a 77M empire. I could feel myself drifting into that dangerous place where despair starts whispering lies. Maybe she's right. Maybe you really aren't in the will. Maybe he changed everything and never told you. Sigh. The kind of sigh that feels like your soul deflates just a little. But then, quietly, gently, another thought rose inside me like a small spark of stubborn hope. My husband was a thoughtful man, a careful man, a loving man, and nothing about this feels like him. I gripped that thought tightly. I held on to it like a lifeline. Because Melissa wasn't confident. She was rehearsed. She wasn't calm. She was desperate to convince the room before the truth arrived. She wasn't strong. She was scared of something. And scared people brag loudly. The lawyer finally entered, holding a thick folder, his expression unreadable but strangely amused. When he saw Melissa practically vibrating with fake excitement, the corner of his mouth lifted like he already knew something she didn't. And the entire room leaned forward, ready for the truth to slice through all the lies. But just as Melissa smirked at me one last time, completely certain she had already won, the lawyer opened the will, and the look on his face told me everything was about to change. Have you ever had a moment where someone's behavior feels so wrong, so wildly out of place, that your mind suddenly drifts back to things you once ignored? Moments that once felt small, but suddenly glow like warning lights you should have paid attention to. That's exactly what happened. The second the lawyer sat down with that thick folder, and Melissa leaned forward like a hungry cat waiting to pounce. The room felt tight, almost buzzing, and I swear I could hear my own heartbeat over the soft chatter. My hands were trembling under the table, and I kept rubbing my thumb against my palm just to keep myself grounded. A quiet little sigh kept slipping out of me without permission, like my body was trying to release the anxiety that my mind was too busy swallowing. But then, out of nowhere, memories of my husband started floating into my head, memories I hadn't thought about in years. Tiny moments that suddenly felt like puzzle pieces I had never bothered to assemble. Oh, I could almost see him standing near his old desk, smiling that tired but warm smile he wore whenever he thought he was being clever. Once, shortly before he passed, He gently held my hand and said, "Just remember, not everything is written on the first page." At the time, I actually laughed, thinking he was talking about some silly novel he wanted me to read. I didn't know he was hiding messages inside those little half-jokes. Another memory hit me like a soft punch. One afternoon, he locked himself in his office for hours, scribbling notes and sighing under his breath. When I asked him what he was doing, he looked up with those serious eyes and said, "Just putting things where they belong." I shrugged it off then, thinking it was financial stuff. But now that Melissa had declared war and my own son was acting like a stranger wearing his body, everything suddenly felt connected. My husband was a smart man, too, smart to leave $77 million unprotected, and he was observant. He noticed things. He once pulled me aside after a family dinner and whispered, "Keep your guard up around her. She watches you too closely." At the time, I brushed it off. I even teased him. "Oh, stop it. She's just young and nervous." He shook his head and said something I will never forget. People who stare at something they want don't always have pure reasons. That memory hit me so hard I nearly gasped right there in the room. Was he trying to warn me? Was he preparing me without saying the full truth? As the lawyer cleared his throat, Melissa elbowed Ethan proudly, whispering something into his ear, and I swear he flashed the smallest, guiltiest smile. I felt my heart ache again. My boy, my baby, letting someone else pull his strings like a puppet. I almost started weeping right there from the heartbreak, but I blinked fast and steadied myself. Not now. Hold it in, hold it in. I looked at the lawyer's face. He wasn't rushed, he wasn't nervous, he wasn't sad. He looked amused. And that confused me. Why would the person who knew the contents of this will look like he was trying not to laugh? What did he know that Melissa clearly didn't? My breath softened a little as another memory drifted back, one that suddenly mattered more than I ever understood. A week before my husband passed, he asked me for a cup of tea. He rested his head back and whispered, "If anyone ever tries to make you feel small, remember you are the foundation here, not them." His voice was shaking, weak, but his eyes were burning with meaning. And then he squeezed my hand and added, "You'll understand when the time comes." At that moment, I hadn't realized a war was coming, but he did. He knew something he didn't want to burden me with until I absolutely needed it. Suddenly, a new thought hit me so hard, I felt my stomach twist. What if my husband knew Melissa's true nature long before I did? What if he saw her greed, her ambition, her obsession with money and power? What if he knew she might one day influence our son into turning against me? What if he built protections, not for the estate, but for me? Oh God, my fingers actually started shaking harder at that thought. What did he hide in that will? What did he prepare? What did he protect? The lawyer flipped the first page open, and I swear the sound of that paper turning felt like thunder. Melissa leaned so far forward she looked like she was about to crawl across the table. I sat still, breathing in slow, shaky breaths. But that memory, him saying, "Not everything is written on the first page," hit me again, as if he were speaking to me right now across time. Because suddenly I felt him with me, like a quiet armor wrapping around my spine, whispering, "Don't be scared. I planned for this." Why did it look like he was holding back laughter? I felt my pulse speed up, my entire body leaning in without moving. Something was wrong with Melissa's confidence. Something didn't add up. If she truly knew everything, why was the lawyer amused instead of sympathetic? Why did he look at me with warmth and at her with pity? Oh, my heart did this tiny jump of hope. Just a spark. But enough. The lawyer placed his finger on the page, glanced at me, glanced at her, and then, Oh, God. His shoulders actually shook like he was holding in laughter. Melissa's smile faltered. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, and the lawyer finally inhaled deeply, preparing to speak the first line of the will, the line that would begin unraveling everything she believed she had already won. And right then, as the lawyer tilted his head and smiled directly at her, I realized my husband had left behind a secret, one that was about to turn her victory into ashes. Have you ever seen a person look so sure of their victory that they start celebrating before the game even begins? That's how Melissa sat there, back straight, lips curled, already acting like the new queen of the family fortune, while I tried to steady my shaky breath and keep my hands from trembling. The lawyer pressed his palms together, clearing his throat with a small smirk. He wasn't even hiding anymore, and the moment he looked at her, oh my goodness, the way her confidence flickered, I swear I felt a tiny spark of hope warm my chest. I had been drowning in fear and heartbreak for 2 days, and suddenly I felt my husband's memory wrap around me like a quiet hug, whispering, "Just watch." The lawyer began reading, slow and calm, and I held my breath without meaning to. "I leave my wife," he started, and Melissa actually gasped. Yes, she gasped, because that was not how her version of the story began. Ha ha ha. Her eyes widened so dramatically I almost laughed out loud. She tried to hide her reaction with a stiff smile, but her shoulders tensed and her fingers dug into the armrest like she was trying to hold on to a fantasy slipping through her hands. The lawyer continued, "And properties for as long as she lives." My breath caught. Oh, tears threatened to well up. That was my husband speaking directly to me. His voice echoed in my heart like he was standing beside me again. Melissa made a choking sound, somewhere between shock and rage, and she snapped her head toward my son as if demanding he fix the will with his eyes. He looked stunned, almost pale. For the first time, he wasn't avoiding my gaze. The lawyer didn't stop. He turned the page, still smiling to himself, and said, "There is more." I swear. Melissa's soul left her body for a moment. She sat frozen, lips parted, blinking too fast like she couldn't process that her empire had just slipped through her fingers. My heart was pounding, but in a different way now. Not from fear, but from a rising sense of truth finally standing up. Sigh, relief washed through me in a soft, shaky wave. The next line hit the room like thunder. My wife shall remain the primary decision-maker of my entire estate, including all financial matters. No changes can be made by any beneficiary without her written approval. Melissa's jaw dropped. Her fingers stopped moving. Her smile evaporated like water on hot pavement. The shock in her face was so raw I actually had to look away to stop myself from laughing. A tiny ha 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 slipped out anyway, but I covered it with a cough. She clenched her jaw so hard the muscle twitched, and she hissed at Ethan. "What did you tell me? You said your dad left everything to us." He sank into his seat, his hands covering his forehead. He whispered, "That's what I thought. I don't understand." Oh, his voice cracked, and for the first time in weeks I felt a small ache of sympathy for him. Not for her, never for her, but for him, because it was clear now. My son hadn't betrayed me out of cruelty. He had been misled, manipulated, poisoned by her certainty. The lawyer tapped his finger against the table and said, "We're not done yet." Melissa's head snapped up so fast I heard her earrings jingle. The lawyer flipped to a page near the back. Yellowed, handwritten, obviously personal. "This section," he said, "was written in your husband's own handwriting." My heart squeezed. My husband! His handwriting! A tear slipped out before I could stop it, and I wiped it slowly, weeping quietly, but not from pain this time, from the feeling of being loved, protected, remembered. The lawyer read, "I know people change after I'm gone. I know influence is a dangerous thing. So I am leaving the final protection of my estate in the hands of the one person who has never betrayed it, my wife." The lawyer continued, "If any person, beneficiary or spouse, attempts to manipulate, pressure, or force my wife to surrender control, that person shall be immediately removed from all inheritance consideration." "This is ridiculous. He can't do that." The lawyer smiled, that smile, and said, "He already did." Ha ha ha, I couldn't help it this time. A soft laugh escaped me, not cruel, not mocking, just relieved. "This is fake," she spat, trembling with rage. This is illegal." The lawyer raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, I helped him draft this myself. Every signature, every date, every legal seal is authentic." She gasped again, louder this time, and suddenly I felt a wave of calm roll through me. Oh, it felt like the first deep breath I had taken since my husband passed. The lawyer wasn't done. I whispered, "To me?" He nodded and opened a small sealed envelope inside the folder. The sound of paper sliding out felt like the world holding its breath. My heart thumped in my ears. Melissa leaned forward like she wanted to snatch it from his hands. But he turned slightly away from her and cleared his throat. "Your husband wrote this to be read only in the presence of witnesses, in case anyone attempted to challenge his decisions." Oh God! Oh my heart! Oh my trembling soul! What did he write? My fingers shook against my lap. The room leaned in. Melissa's rage-filled eyes were practically begging for the ground to open up beneath me. And then, slowly, gently, the lawyer lifted the letter. And as he unfolded that letter, my husband's final message to me, I suddenly knew this wasn't just a will reading, it was a revelation waiting to explode. Have you ever waited so long for someone's last words that when the moment finally comes, your whole body feels like it's made of trembling air? That's exactly how I felt as the lawyer unfolded my husband's handwritten letter, the paper slightly wrinkled, the ink softened with age, and my heart beating so loudly I swear the whole room could hear it. My chest tightened with a mix of fear and longing. I missed him so much, and just seeing his handwriting made tears well up instantly. Not the dramatic kind, just that quiet weeping that leaks from the corners of your eyes before you even realize you're crying. Meanwhile, Melissa was practically vibrating with panic, her fake confidence crumbling piece by piece. She snapped, "Why is there a letter? Why wasn't I told?" Ha ha! Oh, if arrogance were a living creature, it would have looked exactly like her in that moment. The lawyer ignored her and began reading slowly, his voice steady, almost gentle. My beloved wife. The minute those words left his mouth, I felt my breath catch. My hands pressed over my chest. Hearing him call me that again felt like someone had reached into my heart and turned on a warm light. Melissa, on the other hand, made a noise, more like a bitter scoff, as if she hoped interrupting would change the ink on the page. The letter continued. If this message is being read, then you are facing pressure from people who believe they deserve more than they earned. Oh my God, I gasped, out loud, a full, sharp, uncontrollable gasp. Melissa looked like someone had slapped her. The lawyer kept reading. Do not be afraid. I saw their intentions long before they showed themselves. My entire body shivered, trembling from truth, from relief, from the sudden knowledge that he knew. He knew everything I didn't dare say aloud. Melissa jumped to her feet, shouting, "This is ridiculous! He can't be talking about us!" The lawyer paused, looked directly at her, then slowly looked back at the letter, and the timing was so perfect it almost felt scripted. He continued, I am especially concerned about outsiders who enter the family seeking control, not connection. Melissa let out this dramatic gasp, like the air had been punched out of her. She looked at my son as if begging him to rescue her, but he only stared at the floor, his cheeks burning with shame. She hissed, "Say something! Tell him you don't believe this!" But Ethan didn't answer. He looked small, lost. Sigh. Seeing him like that squeezed my heart painfully. But I also knew this moment was necessary. The lawyer read the next line, and my knees almost buckled. My dear wife has sacrificed more than anyone will ever know. She will be the guardian of this estate for the rest of her life. Anyone attempting to remove her shall be removed instead. Removed instead. Oh! I felt a wave of warmth roll through me, relief so strong I had to hold the edge of the table to stay steady. "I want to see proof," she screamed, her voice shaking with rage, her tone cracking like broken glass. The lawyer calmly handed her the page. She snatched it, eyes racing, but the more she read, the more her face drained of color. "No, no, no, this isn't right." He told Ethan. He told him something different. She sounded desperate now, like someone watching a castle melt in her hands. I couldn't help it. A tiny ha 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 escaped me. It sounded almost sweet, not mocking, but amused by how quickly her lies were falling apart. My son covered his face with both hands, whispering, I didn't know. His voice broke, and that sound, ah! It stabbed straight into my heart. I wanted to reach out, but I also knew the truth needed to land fully before I comforted him. The lawyer continued with the final lines of the letter. My wife has a stronger heart than she believes, and I trust her judgment above all. To my son, I love you deeply. But love must not blind you. If someone stands beside you only for wealth, this will reveal them. That last sentence hit Ethan like a wave. He lifted his head, eyes wet, lips trembling. He looked at Melissa. Not with love, not with anger, but with realization. A heartbreaking, soul-crushing realization. Did you marry me for the money? He whispered. Melissa froze. Her eyes darted wildly. What? Of course not! How could you even— Then why? He said softly. Did you tell Mom she was out of the will before we even saw it? That exact second, the room cracked open. Her lies, her manipulation, all of it collapsed. She tried to grab his arm. He pulled away. No, he said, voice shaking. No more. Not today. Ah, I felt tears sliding down my cheeks again, not from sadness this time, but from the painful relief of watching truth finally shine through. Melissa turned on me like a cornered animal. This is your fault. You witch. You stole everything. I blinked slowly, wiped my tears, and whispered, I didn't steal anything. Your greed did. She lunged like she wanted to argue more, but Ethan stepped between us for the first time since this nightmare began. Don't embarrass me more. She stood trembling, breath loud and uneven, her whole face twisted with disbelief. She had come expecting to walk out 77M richer. Instead, she looked like someone watching their dreams turn to dust. The lawyer closed the folder gently and said, If there are no objections, the will stands exactly as written. Melissa let out a soft, defeated whimper. Ethan said nothing. And I placed my hand over my heart and whispered a tiny, thank you to my husband. But little did I know, the fallout of this moment would shake our entire family, and Melissa wasn't done fighting yet. That's exactly how Melissa looked after the will was read, her perfect confidence melting into panic, her voice shaking, her eyes darting around the room like she was searching for a door out of her own lies. For a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Truly, a tiny part of me softened. But then the memory of her whispering, You're out of the will. The lawyer closed the folder and leaned back with a calm sigh, like he'd just finished watching a comedy, not a legal disaster. Ha ha ha. The whole room felt the strange awkwardness of it. Melissa stood frozen, her lips trembling, her hands clutching her expensive purse so tightly her knuckles turned white. She muttered, "This can't be happening. This can't." And then suddenly she spun toward my son. "Ethan, say something." "Fix this." Her voice cracked into a desperate squeal, like she was losing her grip on both the money and the man she married. Ethan looked exhausted, confused, ashamed, his eyes red, his shoulders slumped, his breath shaky. "You told me Mom was out." His voice trembled on the word Mom, and oh, my heart, that tiny crack of softness almost made me weep again. "But Melissa?" "Oh." She wasn't done. She jolted toward the lawyer like a storm, shouting, "You helped her do this." "Oh. You're on her side." The lawyer raised an eyebrow so slowly it practically said, "Ma'am, please behave. I'm on the side of the law," he replied calmly. Melissa let out a weird, choking laugh. But in a broken, painful way, and threw her hands into the air. He never trusted her. She pointed at me like she was accusing me of theft. He wanted M.E. to manage things. He said I understood business. He said... Ethan suddenly cut her off. "When did he tell you that?" "You met him 3 times. She blinked, swallowed, blinked again. She tried to gather words, but nothing came out, not one sound. And for the first time, the truth wasn't something someone had to speak. It was something that was painfully, awkwardly obvious. She lied and kept lying until the truth smacked her so hard her voice stopped working. Sigh. I looked down at my hands, still trembling from the emotional storm, and whispered inside myself, "Thank you, my love." Melissa's panic flipped into anger again. People like her always bounce between those two emotions. "You tricked me," she shouted at Ethan. "You tricked me into thinking we'd have money. You tricked me into believing." She jumped back like she hadn't expected him to shout. "Stop blaming everyone else," he continued, voice shaky but firm. "You lied to me first." Melissa's face twisted into something almost unrecognizable, like she couldn't choose whether to cry or scream. "You said your dad didn't trust her," she yelled, pointing at me like a child tattling. "You said she didn't know how to manage things." "I never said that," he whispered. "You twisted everything I ever said." Then he looked at me. Finally. Properly. His eyes trembling, his voice weak. "Mom, I'm so sorry." Oh. My lips started shaking, and tears welled up again. Not the hurt tears from earlier, but the soft, thankful ones. But before I could say anything, Melissa snapped at him again. "Don't apologize to her. Everything is hers now. We're ruined because of her." My heart was pounding, but something powerful rose inside me. Not anger, not vengeance, just clarity. "We're not ruined," I said softly. "Only lies are ruined today." Even the air paused. Melissa stared at me with wild eyes, like she couldn't believe I dared speak. She opened her mouth and shrieked, "You stole!" "Not me." She froze again, completely still, because those words hit her right where her fantasy had lived. She wanted money more than marriage, control more than connection, wealth more than truth. And the will exposed every bit of it. Ethan sank back in his chair, running his fingers through his hair, whispering, "What did I do? What did I get myself into?" And, that sound made me ache. "It's okay," I whispered, even though my throat was tight. The truth always comes out, sometimes painfully, but it comes. Melissa snapped back into motion, jerking her purse up like she was about to storm out. "This isn't over," she shouted, tears streaking her mascara. "I'll fight this. I'll sue." The lawyer interrupted. "Ma'am, your behavior today already disqualifies you under the conditions of the will. There is nothing left for you to claim." She gasped, loud, sharp, broken, and then let out a soft, "No, no." Then she turned toward Ethan, grabbed his arm, and hissed, "Let's go, now." He looked at her hand, then at me, then back at her, and he gently pulled his arm out of her grip. "Ethan, you can't leave me standing here like this." But he did. She stumbled back, shaking, breathing heavily, then stormed out, slamming the door so loudly the whole room jumped. Sigh. I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I just breathed. Free. But even as the door slammed behind her and silence filled the room, I knew something else. Something bigger was still coming because my son wasn't ready to face the truth of what he'd done. Have you ever watched someone you love sit there, completely broken, completely confused, completely stripped of every lie they believed, and for a moment your heart aches so deeply that you don't even know whether to comfort them or let them face the consequences they created? That's exactly how it felt when Melissa stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled, leaving my son standing there like a man who had just woken up in the ruins of a life he didn't realize was already collapsing. Ethan sank into a chair, covering his face with shaking hands, letting out a long, painful sigh. One of those sighs that comes from the chest, from the heart, from the place where regret lives. "Mom, what have I done?" he whispered, voice trembling. Oh, that whisper. It stabbed me right in the center of my heart. I walked closer, slowly, my hands still shaking from everything that had happened. I wasn't angry anymore. I was tired, sad, relieved. So many emotions swirling that I didn't know where one ended and the other began. I sat beside him, but not too close. I wanted him to speak on his own, not because he felt forced. He kept staring at the floor like it was the only thing holding him together. "I let her turn me against you," he said softly. "I let her fill my head with lies. I let her make me think you were trying to control everything." His voice cracked, and he swallowed hard, blinking rapidly like he was fighting tears. Seeing my grown son struggle like that made my own eyes burn. I was weeping inside even before a single tear fell. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked suddenly, looking up with these lost, watery eyes. "Why didn't you tell me? Dad wrote all that. Why didn't you warn me?" I sighed gently. "Because love doesn't try to win," I whispered. "Love tries to understand. And I wanted you to see the truth on your own, not because I told you to." "I feel so stupid," he said. "She said you were selfish. She said you were trying to keep everything from us." She made it sound so believable. That part pierced me, because hearing your own child admit he believed someone else over you is a pain that no inheritance, no money, no will could ever compare to. But I reached over gently and placed my hand on his arm. "You're not stupid," I said softly. "You were manipulated, and you wanted so badly to start a new life that you didn't see who you were trusting." He covered his eyes again and whispered, "I'm so sorry, Mom." And that broke me. Tears finally escaped me, warm and quiet, sliding down my cheeks. Not angry tears, just human ones. The kind that come from finally hearing something your heart has waited too long to hear. "I never hated you," he said, voice cracking. "I never wanted to hurt you. I thought she cared about us. She cared about the money," I said, not cruelly, just honestly. "And when people care about money more than love, they'll burn anything to get it." For a moment we just sat there in silence, two people breathing in the ashes of a storm, trying to understand what was left. Finally he whispered, "Mom, will you forgive me?" My heart squeezed. Forgive him? Of course I would. A mother's heart breaks, but it also heals. It stretches, it bends, it finds ways to love even through fire. I forgave you long before today. I said softly, brushing a tear from my cheek. But forgiveness doesn't erase pain. It teaches us how to grow past it. He nodded again, tears streaming freely now, and, seeing him cry like that felt like watching the boy he used to be push through the man he had become. Then he looked at me, eyes red but clearer than they'd been in months. I don't want anything from the estate, he said suddenly. Not after what happened. You keep everything. I just want my mom back. My breath hitched. I gasped softly, pressing a hand over my heart because those words, I just want my mom back. They pulled something deep inside me, something that had been locked away since the first lie left Melissa's lips. A warm, heavy tear rolled down my face, and I whispered, You just forgot how to reach me. He leaned forward, resting his forehead against my shoulder like he used to as a little boy, and I held him, slowly at first, then tightly, as if time itself had been waiting for this moment to stitch us back together. We stayed like that for a while, breathing, crying, healing. Sigh! For the first time since my husband died, the room didn't feel heavy. It felt peaceful, real, honest. When Ethan finally sat back, wiping his eyes, he asked quietly, What happens now? I smiled gently, wiping his cheek the way I did when he was little. Now, I said, we rebuild. Not the estate, not the money. Us. He nodded, and for the first time in a long time, I saw the spark of my boy again, the kindness, the clarity, the heart. Later, after the lawyer packed his things and left, we stepped outside together. The sun was setting, turning the sky pink and gold, the way it used to look when my husband and I watched it from the porch. It felt like a blessing, like a soft whisper saying, It's okay now. Ethan took a deep breath, finally calm, and whispered, Dad was right, wasn't he? I smiled, tears in my eyes. He usually was. We both laughed. A real one this time, and something in the air felt lighter. True. And as the sky warmed around us and my son finally stood beside me again, I realized something my husband must have known all along. Money can blind people, but truth always brings them home.